Diary entry number 10. The roommate without ears. It was moving day. Thankfully, the landlord understood my situation and didn't charge me an eviction fee. But things didn't get better. They got worse. The abuse escalated. We now lived on the top floor of an apartment building, and number one pushed me down the stairs twice. To this day, I still deal with the injuries from those falls. I landed flat on my feet at the bottom each time. My knees and elbows were scraped and bruised, but the worst damage was done to my back. Those falls left a mark that never really went away. Meanwhile, my ex-husband continued to show up unexpectedly. I didn't understand how he always knew where I was. What I know now is that number one would text my ex-husband pretending to be me and try to get money out of him that way. Number one would also blame me for my ex-husband showing up. He said it was my fault. He told me that if I didn't get rid of him, the abuse would only get worse. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped between two men. I was trying to protect my past while trying to survive in my future until I could get away. People always question, why didn't you call the police? That answer is simple. When you are so scared and you believe what your abuser tells you. Mine would say, they won't believe you. You don't have proof. You will go to jail before I will, and things like that. Yes, when you've not been abused, it looks easy on the outside, but in it, you feel so completely lost. Within 2 months, we were already facing another eviction. The stress was overwhelming. We argued more, and every argument seemed to become another excuse for abuse. One night, number one hit me so hard that both my diamond earrings flew right out of my ears. I actually lost one of them. To this day, I have no idea where it landed. The force of that punch was so violent that it knocked the earrings completely free. That was the point where I truly wanted out. The problem was that wanting to leave and knowing how to leave are two very different things. I was trying to figure out my escape plan when an opportunity appeared. One day I stopped by my job to visit a friend. Number one came over and told me he had an idea. He had found a house to rent, and one of his co-workers needed a roommate. At first, I thought it sounded perfect. I even remember thinking to myself, if we live with another person, he'll see what's happening. I thought maybe somebody would finally speak up on my behalf. Maybe someone would notice. Maybe someone would help. So we moved in. At first, the roommate seemed normal enough. He worked with number one and mostly kept to himself. I thought his quiet nature would mean less drama. I was wrong. A few weeks later, we all went out one night. After a few beers, he started trying to hit on every woman he saw. The way he talked about women disgusts me. He wasn't looking for a relationship. He was looking for a fix. Not from drugs, but from sex. I also overheard him talking about me to number one at work. All they do is argue and have sex. And that's how he described our relationship. Honestly, it felt like he was jealous. And to be honest, the sex that was going on was forced. And what I know now is what I learned in therapy. My therapist said that you can absolutely get raped in a relationship. And I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know that was a thing. Because that's what was happening. Every single time he was getting his fix, he would do this to me. The abuse temporarily shifted from physical violence to manipulation. There was still yelling. There were still threats. There were still lies. Most of those lies came from number one telling me what stories I needed to tell other people. That part was especially difficult because I've always been honest to a fault. Even the rent agreement was strange. The original plan was to split everything in half. Instead, the roommate insisted on paying only 1/3 of the rent. It didn't make sense to me, but he was determined. Money was already tight because nearly every dollar I had was going towards number one's addiction. We went to parties. We hung out with his friends. I thought we were having fun. I thought we were building a social life. What I didn't understand was number one wasn't there for friendships. He was there for the drugs. Then things got even more chaotic. The roommate would hand me the money for rent, and number one would take it. With that extra money, number one stayed high nearly all day, every day. Then one day he texted me, "I got something for us." After a few minutes later, he sent me a picture of a puppy. My first reaction was excitement. It wasn't panic. Yes, we could barely afford to feed ourselves. And how were we supposed to care for a puppy? But then I met her, and I fell in love instantly. She was a tiny little ball of fluff that had been dumped on the side of the road with her sibling. She couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old. I wasn't even sure whether she was a boy or a girl at first. I wanted to name her something very feminine, but number one suggested a more neutral. But for now, I'll just call her Puppy for my story. So I compromised, and her name became Puppy. And from that moment on, she was my baby. She was so smart, sweet, already trying to go potty outside. She brought me the kind of comfort and joy that I didn't even realize I needed. And for the first time in a long time, I had something that made me smile every single day. But even that wasn't simple. Number one would make me leave Puppy at home alone for hours. The roommate would text me while I was gone. "Your dog peed everywhere. Your dog pooped on the floor. The house stinks." Number one would tell me to make up some excuse to keep him happy. Then I'd come home and clean up everything. The truth was that she was just a baby. No puppy that young should ever have been left alone for that long. As the months passed, the bills piled up. The roommate got sick and eventually became too sick to work. The electric bill was in his name because my credit and finances had already been damaged by years of instability and consistently moving. Then he discovered the truth. The rent hadn't been getting paid, not for months. The money he thought that was going to the landlord had disappeared. He had reached his limit. He told us he was moving back in with his family because he couldn't do it anymore. And honestly, I didn't blame him for leaving. What I do struggle with is what he admitted to me before he left. He told me he knew I was being abused. He knew. He saw it. He heard it. But he didn't want to get involved. He didn't want to risk his friendship with number one, so he stayed silent. That's why I call him the roommate without ears, because hearing and listening are not the same things. After he left, things fell apart fast. The electricity was shut off. It was Christmas. The house was cold and dark. Puppy and I would curl up under a blanket together, trying to stay warm. No matter what happened to me, I knew I would protect her. She was my family. Eventually, the landlord had enough. He sat me down and said, "Look, you gotta leave. You owe 4 months of back rent. We've given you extra time because you're so sweet, and we understand what you're going through." I lost so many things during that move. Photos, possessions, pieces of my life. Number one told me we were moving to his uncle's house. I had never met his uncle before. After only 2 trips with just my vehicle, number one looked at me and said, "This is the last load. Get what you really want. Everything else stays. I need gas money, and the rest of this cash is for my fix." Standing there watching my belongings get left behind, I had no idea things were about to get even more worse. I wasn't prepared for what life at his uncle's house would become. But that story belongs in the next diary entry. Thank you for listening. I'm a soft-spoken survivor, and you have listened to a Nervous System Diary.